new party Outlaws is not about politics or even getting elected to office, although this revolutionary campaign will lead to us holding respectable seats in the House of Representatives and Senate after the 2010 election's over. The very idea of politics runs against the founding principle behind being an outlaw. Outlaws aren't criminals, although they've been known to commit crimes to further their goals or express frustration with the status quo. Outlaws are natural byproducts of corrupt political systems. Since political systems by nature are all corrupt, the concept of outlawism is universal. Wherever you look in the history of society, you'll find criminals and outlaws. Criminals slither around on their bellies pretending to be your best friend while stabbing you in the back with one hand and stealing your wallet with the other. An outlaw is one who might catch you, slit his throat, and give you your wallet back. But then he or she will likely have to go on the run because the dead thief is someone like the governor's son or even the governor himself. Most people prefer to give criminals what they want when they want it in order to avoid confrontation. Outlaws simply don't have it in them to bend over for criminals that way. Politics is how criminals avoid confronting each other. In the first Greek democracy, thugs from all over the ancient world gathered together to form rules for how they could get along with each other without fighting costly wars so they could better enjoy the spoils taken from their own people. The word politics derives from the word polite. This is where the fate of the many are politely negotiated to support the interests of the few. Many Americans equate the greatness of the United States to our being a democratic, capitalistic republic. These arguments, however, fall on many deaf ears these days as our country fails under its own weight with our political or political leaders having no clue what to do about it. They rather appear to be the cause of our demise and seem to have no intention of changing their ways. Those of them who think Wall Street is the cure for mankind's ills are still blaming everything they've done to us on big government, while those who think the only way to save mankind is for big governments to be in absolute control of our future are saying bankers are causing everything to fall apart. I personally followed with first-hand testimony what led to our current situation from the beginning in 1990 when Enron bribed our leaders to make the decisions that brought us here, something you still know nothing about. I know for a fact and will prove that both political parties caused what we're going through and are sticking together to cover up what they did. When you had a scandal that affects both parties equally, there's no one left to expose the truth about it. If only one party had let us down this dead end, we'd have heard about it in the early 1990s and it would have ended. But when they're both responsible for problems of this magnitude, it becomes a non-issue that's pretended to not exist no matter how bad things get. In fact, the worse it gets, the less likely anyone in Washington will want to do anything that will draw attention to it, while more effort is put towards keeping us from finding out the truth. These days, more and more average people are becoming of the mindset of outlaws while questioning the legitimacy of Wall Street and Washington having so much control over our future. In the past, whatever parties in power has enjoyed the privilege of bending us over through whatever avenue they favor, either by using big banks and corporations or by using big government, or really both. It's just that the Republicans let the banks pick our pockets more than they let the IRS, while the Democrats prefer using the IRS to do their dirty work for them. No matter how they spend it, though, the fact remains they both love giving wealth to rich people while leaving the people that create it out in the cold without a pot to piss in. So who's ever in the strongest position to decide which method will be used to rape our future next, the other party becomes our new white knight in shining armor, even though they just got through being thrown out of power for perverting our way of life so tragically. Bush had us with our pants to our knees for 8 years, to the point where all anyone could wish for was something better than knee pads. So the Democrats stepped up to the plate to rescue us. Now they're taking their turn behind us as conservatives mount a counterattack, although not against our current molesters, but against us. Again. Then in the midst of our being gangbanged by multiple political parties, we have what are called third-party options. Of course, if any of them were effective in finding a way to give us back our dignity, we'd already be back on our feet and even have new belts to hold up our pants and skirts with in the future so this doesn't happen again. Then there's what's called independence, which is simply more the same kind of criminals who now cast themselves outside the deck as some kind of wild cards or jokers. What they do is pretend to be addressing the truth about issues that the other parties aren't able to lie about as well as they'd like to. This gives a false sense of security and believing that something will actually get done to address the problems we face responsibly. They also mop up leftover votes after we decide who we'd rather be violated by in the future in order to lessen the likelihood that third-party candidates will win elections and give outsiders a behind-the-scenes look at how they run Washington, which they don't. Wall Street does. Our democracy allows us the right to decide who will take their turn behind us next. As more and more of you begin to realize what's going on and move to get off your knees, there needs to be a way for you to do more than just stand up. You also need to be able to pull up your pants, walk away, get a shower, then see to it that you never find yourself in this kind of degraded and humiliated position again. But then supporting a new political party and trusting them to do your dirty work for you might seem like asking for more of the same. Since anarchy doesn't seem like much of an option in such a complex world, what are we to do? That's where the new party of outlaws comes in. The reason average Americans have become so impotent in being able to control their own destiny is because we've been overpowered by men in suits and ties who contribute nothing to our future but confusion, while reaping the kinds of rewards tyrants only dream about. We've allowed ourselves to believe that what government doesn't provide, big banks and corporations will get for us. So we live from day to day at the mercy of both. What we seem to have forgotten is that without us, neither one of them would exist. What it means is that it is us who ultimately solves all of our own problems, even as their leadership creates more for us to have to pick up the tab for later. But unlike every other country in the world, we have a Constitution and Bill of Rights that allows us to take care of ourselves. We just seem to have forgotten how it's done. If you consider all the big issues today along with the small ones, if we could find a way to solve them on our own, which really means not continuing to create them in the first place, then Wall Street and Washington wouldn't be able to get such a tight grip on our lives. In fact, we owe it to them as well as ourselves to get back to this kind of reality, because they aren't doing themselves any big favors these days either, while they're killing us and our future trying to accomplish whatever it is they think they're doing. What we have to do is find a way to make this right on our own so we can take the wind out of the sails they're using to push us into an abyss we may never get back out of. I know for a fact with regard to most, if not every major issue we face today, our leaders on both sides of the debate are lying about the facts that surround it. In fact, I dare you to bring me one supposed fact coming out of Wall Street or Washington that is presented in such a comprehensive manner that can be fully understood in a way that allows the average American to competently decide what direction we think would be best to deal with it. Since all we're fed is lies or twisted versions of what would be hard to classify as truth, it stands to reason that our leaders are afraid for us to know how things really get done in our nation's capital. As mind-boggling as this all sounds, it does make perfect sense. If we know how things were broken, we can fix it. If everything worked the way it should, we wouldn't be so dependent on them. I look at politicians and bankers as having rock star and movie star complexes where, for whatever reason, even though they're simple employees like the rest of us who are merely expected to do their jobs honestly so everything works, somewhere deep down they feel like they should be compensated for their menial efforts as if they're Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. We're like Taylor Swift, a young country singer who successfully crossed over into the pop music world and who enjoys the kind of success that our leaders might not even know how to dream about. The problem for them is they don't do anything that warrants that kind of attention, unless of course they supersede the normal and stable social process by causing such unprecedented disasters that we're forced to take notice of them. Then once they've gotten our attention, they seem to never want to let it go. I don't know about you, but I like listening to music to get through my day while looking forward to watching movies and bettering the quality of my life in my spare time. So I don't have a problem with artists and actors getting paid millions and pennies on the dollar for what we spend to have access to them, while they also seem to attract great interest in how they live their personal lives. Without them, our quality of life would suffer greatly. So they earn what they take home. However, when I know too much about a politician or banker's life, it's usually because something is gravely wrong that I, like most outlaws, hold them accountable for, even as many might buy their story about how they're going to save us from the problems they caused in the first place. And taking all this into consideration, it occurred to me that all we need to do in order to get our future heading in the right direction is to expose the truth behind the lies we're being told. This makes sense because if the truth weren't so threatening to those who have designs on our freedom, they wouldn't go to so much trouble to cover it up. This is where the new party of outlaws comes in. We use a political election process as a tool of activism to get the word out about what's really going on that Democrats and Republicans are working together to lie about. Of course, once the truth gets out, the issues have to be faced and dealt with long before the election occurs. So a lot of the election process was initially used as a simple tool of activism. By the time the election occurs, there's no one left worth voting for but outlaws who had no real wish to be elected officials who have to don suits and ties every morning so he or she can stand by side with a bunch of con artists looking for a way to further bamboozle the American people. That's where the official outlaw uniform comes in. Part of the problem with recognizing society's criminals for what they are is that we see a suit and tie as normal attire rather than for what it is. If white-collar criminals dropped the suit and tie and started wearing either red or blue bandanas around their head, for them maybe pastels or fluorescent colors would be more appropriate, then we would instantly begin to stereotype them closer to their true nature as gangsters who wear their bandanas around their neck like nooses. And I don't mean any disrespect to outlaw brotherhoods who might use bandanas or other regalia to show off their affiliation with each other. When criminal enterprises organize themselves at the top levels of any society, it's immoral to place a lot of focus on it. Outlaw